I apologize. So the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research is a nonpartisan public policy organization, a research center, and a think tank. And I'm letting other people in, here we go, including Luisa's daughter. We are a gathering of scholars, experts, and community stakeholders engaged in research and dialogue in an effort to create practical policy recommendations to current local, national, and international challenges. Therefore, the center encourages discussion and research from multiple perspectives. We believe that good policy is the result of reasonable dialogue and healthy debate. That is the marketplace of ideas. Thus, through publishing balanced articles and community engagement, the center aspires to provide a platform for critical thinking, analysis, and ideas to confront challenges that affect our world. Please visit our website at palmbeachdemocracy.org. Tonight's event is, there we go. Tonight's event is an excellent example of why the center exists. We are so honored to host Dr. Delsa Bush and Patrick Franklin. However, before I turn it over to Dr. Fleischman, who will formally introduce our panel, I have one administrative request. After our guests complete their presentation, we will open the floor for your questions. To ask a question, you can click the raise hand icon, or you can write your question in the chat box. You can also email me. Some have already emailed me questions, but it would be best if you either write it in the chat box or raise your hand. Now I turn it over to Dr. Fleischman for formal introductions.
Well, thank you so much. And just to say, to repeat some of the, to emphasize some of the things that Steve said, is that our center actually discusses current affairs and puts ideas in writing that are not necessarily associated or affiliated with any particular tendency. But all the tendencies, every opinion is welcome as long as it generates a dialogue. And now with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are having a series of Zoom events. A few weeks ago, we had one on COVID-19, then it was followed by a discussion on genocide. Tonight, we are having this discussion on race relations and police community relations, and write it down on Wednesday, July 15th. The same time, we are going to host here Rosemary Gibson. Rosemary Gibson wrote a book about the need to become independent from China's control of the supply chain of antibiotics and medicines. And she actually is lobbying Congress, and she's becoming a very well-known figure in Congress. And now, thanks to Nancy Menges, we have the honor of hosting here on next Wednesday, July 15th. And it's going to be very interesting because she's going to stress and to focus on the idea of our dependence on China for medical supplies. Now back to tonight. Why are we having this program tonight? I think most of you are aware of the situation. It all began with the publication of a video of a white policeman in Minnesota shocking a black man to death, George Floyd, which that launched or unleashed a series of protests across the country and even beyond, because this protest also reached Europe and some other countries. Protests erupted in the middle of the pandemic, while there have already been reports that the pandemic affected minorities disproportionately, more than white people. Initially, the incident actually brought to question the issue of racism in the police and whether there is a need to reform police, right? Or whether police is racist or toward minorities. But those protests actually did not end as business as usual. We have seen mass protests that they revived the debate on race relation in our country. So the issue seems to be not only the issue of the police and the relation between police and minorities, but a lot of other issues as well actually came up, like inequalities in the health system, in the labor market, in education, right? And then actually the discussion actually went down on the issue of a cultural war, whether certain monuments should be torn down. Well, not only Confederate monuments or monuments of Confederate figures, but also now they are questioned, for instance, Princeton voted to rename the School of Public Policy that was previously, or it is named after Woodrow Wilson. Now even there is question whether we should also debate the possibility of toppling also monuments like George Washington monument, right? I was surprised, I have to be honest, to hear Senator Tammy Duckworth from Chicago that supported the idea of bringing to public debate whether Washington's monuments need to be demolished or not. On the other hand, some people actually claim that there has been a lot of progress in race relations. So tonight we are going to discuss, we have brought two wonderful speakers, one to discuss the issue of police minority relations, and also to discuss the issue of the state of race relations in our country. So this is why we have brought two wonderful speakers. The first speaker is going to be Dr. Delsa Bush. Delsa Bush has an incredible biography. She's currently the Director of Security and Risk Management at Palm Beach State College, and she's a former chief of the West Palm Beach Police. She's a native of Mississippi, the first African-American female office for the city. She was recruited in 1983. The first African-American female sergeant in 1989, and the first African-American female lieutenant in 1995. In 1997, she became the first female of any race, whether, to attain the position of captain, and went on to become the first female assistant chief in the history of the city. And in 2004, Mayor Lois Frankel, now a congresswoman, appointed her to the position of police chief, making her the first African-American and the first female to hold the position in the more than 100 years history of the department in West Palm Beach. So she had a number of achievements in the West Palm Beach Police. Under her tenure, crime was considerably reduced in the city. But Dr. Bush also has a second profession. She's a motivational speaker. She has been the keynote speaker for numerous organizations, ranging from kindergarten to commencement addresses, to colleges, to universities, to police departments. She received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Florida Atlantic University and a Master of Science degree from Lynn University, and also a PhD in global leadership with a specialization in education from Lynn University too. She's the mother of two daughters, Bristol and Yasmin. Patrick Franklin. He is currently the director of the Urban League of Palm Beach County, which, by the way, in itself is a great institution, thanks to Patrick. He was born and raised in Baton Rouge, in Louisiana. Patrick attended Southern University in Baton Rouge and graduated in 1982 with a degree in physics. And then upon graduation, Patrick began a career with Shell Oil Company in New Orleans as a geophysicist, doing exploring, whether there is oil or not, there was oil or not. Then he moved to South Florida, and then he worked for 13 years for Motorola in Boynton Beach. For some of you, I don't know how many of you remember, Motorola was here until maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. almost 20 perhaps. And since in 2002, Patrick accepted a position as interim president and CEO of the Urban League of Palm Beach County. And that November, he actually was appointed to be the president and CEO of the Urban League. Now, under Patrick, the Urban League grew tremendously. It services around 16,000 residents annually. The Urban League has become a leader in youth and education development with signature programs such as the national award-winning Nullities. And a few years ago, in 2013, the Urban League of Palm Beach County was recognized by the National Urban League as one of the top 12 affiliates, 12 branches in the Urban League movement. So you can tell how accomplished Patrick is. Patrick has been married to Rachel Morgan Franklin for the past 24 years, and they have 3 children, Morgan, Lena, and Miles. Now, to reiterate some of the things that Steve already said, the speakers will speak first, and then we will open up to questions. I will ask some questions first myself, and then we will open up to the audience. I remind you, under your box that says participants, you will see on your third box from the left, you are going to see raise your hand. You either click raise hands, and then Steve will allow you to speak. Otherwise, actually send a message by the chat that you want to say something, that you want to ask a question. All right, so without further ado, I call on Delsa to speak.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this forum and to allow me to participate with my contemporary, Patrick Franklin. We have worked a lot of hours together, myself as the chief, and he held me to the task every time. So thank you, Franklin, for that. I am, as everyone else, I am just torn by the current state of the nation. I am torn by the political atmosphere in the country. I am torn by the global situation in the country. I am truly upset. Nobody, I think, in this room doesn't know anyone who has not been affected by the COVID-19 situation and the pandemic. And in my opinion, all of this frustration, this isolation, what is going on right now is, in my opinion, fueling what is happening right now. No one is tolerant. People want to protest. They want to be heard. They want to exercise their constitutional rights to protest peaceably in the nation. And it appears to me that is being thwarted a bit. But I have a whole bunch of issues with some of the ideology that is happening right now. And I may get in trouble for saying this, but when you spoke about the toppling of the monuments, I personally do not agree with that. The Confederacy is just as part of our history as anything else. As painful as it is, we are a nation of descent. We descended from the British. We called our king a tyrant, and New England formed its own American Revolution in a matter of fact. So you can't destroy what happened in history by tearing down monuments. You cannot change a mindset. You can't change the racist who is getting more and more angry because you're tearing down. It's not going to do anything to build the relationships that we need to move forward. Now I'm going to leave that alone because that's Franklin's place But I'm going to talk on something that I know, and I consider myself an expert in law enforcement. I did 29 years in that job, and I can tell you guys right now, I'm pro-police. I bleed blue blood and I bleed red blood. I do not believe in the concept of defunding the police. We must reform the police. I mean, how you cannot live in every society. I don't care how many years you go back in our history. We must have law and order, and someone has to do that dirty job that everyone else does not want to do. And I think it's personal to me because I've been on so many sides of the fence. In 29 years, I've seen a lot happen, and no one understands how difficult the role of police officer is. I happen to be the unlucky recipient of being engaged to the only man that was feloniously shot and killed in the line of duty in 1988 since 1966. And to me, our lives are just as important as anyone else. Do not get me wrong. I am in no way, shape, or form trying to condone or agree with the egregious situations with Floyd, Breonna Taylor. I can remember all the way back to McDuffie in 1979 and the Miami riots and whatnot. No, we're not trying to condone that. I beg of everyone to take a close look at the job of a law enforcement officer and understand that the majority of us, I would venture to say 99%. I went 29 years and the majority of us do this. We go through these years without even pulling our weapon out, never shooting anybody, not even pointing our weapon at anybody or choking anybody or anything like that. But we've been shot at numerous times. We've been hurt, we've been mangled, we've been injured. So I just beg of you to look at both sides of the situation and do not throw the baby out with the bathwater because a few cops do things that are wrong. It's hurtful, it's egregious. A lot of us are just as angry as the rest of the nation about what happened. And we want those people gone, and we want reform. We need the reform. I don't know what side, regardless of the politics, I do not know what side will preside. But all of the bills look good to me, those that are proposed in Congress right now. But some of the things that they're proposing has been around for years. Body cams have been around for years. Most law enforcement agencies wear body cams. Most law enforcement agencies, like what Congress is proposing on the Democratic side, outlaw chokeholds. That's called a lateral vascular constraint. That's been outlawed at most police departments for years. I don't know what is the new thing that a law enforcement officer should not know to restrain a person's, choke a person until they can't breathe, whether it's a chokehold around the neck or whether it's a knee on the neck. We should know better than that. You can't teach law enforcement officers common sense. And that's the other thing. They're talking about training and everything else. My opinion on that is that you can't train an officer not to be an idiot. You can't train an officer not to be a racist, but you can sure weed them out in the hiring process. You can certainly do better than what we are doing in our law enforcement academies. We are teaching, and of course, the Criminal Justice Academy in Palm Beach County is on the Palm Beach State College campus. Our president and I, we have talked. We want to change the training. There must be cultural diversity and sensitivity training, and that is very much lacking. And the only way we can change that is to get with our state government, our governors, our representatives, our senators, because their training curriculum is dictated by FDLE. We can't change it unless the top of the state change that curriculum. These officers need to be trained in the academy, and when they get on the academy into the police force, it needs to continue and continue and it continue. When I was a police chief, I made them have sensitivity training. It did not go over well with a lot of people, but I think it changed a lot of things. And lastly, I'm going to shut up. There's this thing, and a lot of chiefs will probably have my head for saying this, but in law enforcement, there's this concept and this culture, a subculture of it's us versus them. And law enforcement is always right. There's this thing, I call it the thin blue line, the code of silence. When you see officers, and I've seen it so much in my 29 years, you have to change that culture. When you see another officer doing something wrong, what you know, out of that George Floyd video, what shocked me the most was that there were 5 officers standing around and watching this whole thing. And I thought I saw an officer of Asian descent there. I mean, so it wasn't about, it was just a culture there. This is not their first time at the rodeo. They've done this before. And they are so accustomed to doing this till they just blocked everybody out, regardless of whether they were being recorded or people were telling them to stop. For someone to murder someone literally in the presence, in broad daylight, in the presence of everybody, it has to go deeper than that. It has to be a culture of abuse that has to change and must stop. So that's my take.
All right. Thank you so much, Delsa. And, you know, there will be probably plenty of questions, very interesting presentation. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Luis and Stephen, thank you for having me join this call tonight. And to my good friend Delsa Bush, thank you for giving us that summation of police relations. And I really thank you for giving that overview. I just want to say a couple of things in regards to an Urban League perspective. The Urban League, for most of you, may not know who we are and what we do. Our mission is to help African Americans and other minorities achieve social and economic equality. Now, with all this work that has been going on and the issues been going on over the last, I would say 2.5 months now, everything that's been going on in conjunction with COVID has really spawned a very, very tight and just conjectured spawn of events that has really turned our country around. We're part of the National Urban League, part of 85 different urban leagues across the country. And I just want to share this with everyone on the call tonight. I have colleagues that my counterpart in Minneapolis, my counterpart in Atlanta, my counterpart in St. Louis for Ferguson, my counterpart that has been in every major city that all these issues have occurred, not only over the last 3 months, but also over the last 50 years, okay? And I can say that because I have colleagues that have been running urban leagues for 50+ years. And they shared the same stories with us younger leaders over and over and over again. But to hear the pain of my sister in Lexington, Kentucky, when we're on a call every week on a national call with my colleagues, and to hear the pain that they're going through. And the only thing that I can just pray and hope for in the back of my mind is that we don't have to deal with that here in our community. But just peel back 3-4 years ago with Corey Jones. Peel that back. We had the same situation here in Palm Beach County. But I applaud the Banks and the Jones family from Boynton Beach, because the way they held that family together and the way they held this community together, that many of you may not know, the trials and tribulations that that family went through, the discussions they had with so many people around our community, day in and day out. I was on many panels, and we weren't using Zoom back then because we were meeting face to face back then. But I always use that family as an exemplary family of what we should do when a community has to fall upon each other to say, how can we rise beyond this issue? We had a young black male shot to death and murdered by a police officer. And the officer was convicted here in Palm Beach County. Let's not forget that. And we handled it in a totally different way. Going back to, I wrote a note down and I said, I believe in peaceful protests. And if it wasn't for COVID right now, I would have led at least one protest, as big as I could have gotten in Palm Beach County, if it wasn't for COVID right now, because I believe the time has come right now for us to understand what is going on, why it's going on, and why it has come to a point where enough is enough. It has come to a point where people have been oppressed generation after generation after generation, with laws and other things that have come down the pipe to keep people oppressed and keep them within the same structure and confines that their parents and their parents were confined to. Education, health, jobs, housing. These are the core principles that the Urban League was born on 110 years ago. The same core values. Those are the same core issues that I'm working on at the Urban League of Palm Beach County, which we have been working on locally for the last 47 years. It has not changed. I wish that I could work myself out of a job. I wish we can do away with the Urban League. But when the numbers are growing year after year and after year, when the people that come to us look like every one of you on this call, they're coming to us because our 22 programs are free. We're working with families to keep a roof over their head. We're working with families to make sure they have a job. We're working with families to make sure their kids continue through school, finish high school, and get to college so they can prepare themselves for college, work, and life. When you add all that together, look at how do we sustain this? It's by the work with people like Louise Fleshman and other people that's on this call will say, I agree with the fundamental issues that we're addressing and working with today. This is not easy work. This is not easy work at all. This is where you put in the extra time, the extra involvement, and you listen more and more and more, because this is a time that we need the dialogue. We need to, when Chief Bush was at the city of West Palm Beach, we had community dialogues. We had town hall meetings. It looks a little different today. We do it via Zoom, just like we're doing now. But believe me, we're still having these conversations. We're still having conversations that must be had. Because I think the real key to racial relations right now, that so many people just don't understand why Black folks had enough. We have solved the racial issues that we're faced with today. We have to look at the laws. We have to look at the deep-rooted criminal justice system that will create a person that's in their teens and have a record that will follow them forever and a day for petty theft, that will keep them from getting a job, that will keep them oppressed, that will keep them in the same economic cycle that they've always been, or worse. So when we look at all these different things and how entwined racism is within the fabric of this country, and I look at the criminal justice system, and I know Chief Bush has a lot of answers for me, because I'm not an expert in this, but when you have laws that are made by individuals to create prison beds that are filled with prisons that are for profit, that they have to have people in those beds to make a profit, something's wrong with that. And we have laws that will make sure that you will keep arresting people and keep pushing them through the system because that's what the system demands at the end of the day. We have to look at all these different things. We have to look at all these issues that people are not moving in the right way. We look at the economic position right now of African Americans. People are starting to rebound from COVID, getting back to work. But the unemployment for Black Americans right now is 20+%. 20+%. And if we don't understand that as this economic roller coaster moves forward and people start to rise up and come out of the depths of economic ruins that we've gone through, Black folks are being left behind because we're not being hired to come back to work at the same rate that others are. Our jobs are not there. They're going to run out of unemployment very soon. I anticipate another rush on housing foreclosure in the next 2 to 3 months, just like we had in 2008, 2009. I anticipate that coming, and it's going to come with a vengeance because people can't afford to live in the homes that they're in right now. So there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about. There's a lot of things going on, but I think having these conversations, and I think the true core of it is to make sure that people understand. If you don't understand what's happening, you need to ask the questions. You need to find someone to talk to, and if they can't answer for you, keep finding, look for someone else. Keep looking, and keep having conversations. And then once you find out enough information, call somebody. Talk to your family members. Talk to your neighbor. Make sure they understand the plight and the issues, how deeply racism is embedded in this country. I want to just say this. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I graduated from Robert E. Lee Senior High School in Baton Rouge. I played football, and I graduated top 2% in my class. I had a rebel flag on my uniform. And back then, you either you wore it or you didn't play. But since I graduated from that high school in 1978, the school was torn down 4 years ago and rebuilt. And right now they're going through, they're taking the name off the school. And I support that because there's no way that we should be honoring the Confederacy of this country that was going against the United States of America. It wouldn't happen in any other country. And I think that's another question for us to delve into at another time. But I grew up in an area where Confederate statues were just as plain as a street sign on any corner in my town and then throughout Louisiana. But those statues were put there for a reason in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. It was put there to make sure that you never ever forgot the oppressionist ways of the Confederacy. That was put there for a reason. Okay, it wasn't to honor the Confederate general. It was put there to make sure that Black folks remember that they will be oppressed today and tomorrow. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over back to Luis.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it was two very interesting presentations, and I know there probably are questions from the audience. Remember, raise your hand, and then Steve will allow you to speak, or send questions via chat. I will be happy to read them. My question is, Delsa, you talk about bills that currently exist in Congress that you support, and you also talk about a gap between the curriculum of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and what people do in the local academy that is based in the Palm Beach State College. Can you be a little bit more specific? You're right, because you say sensitivity training has been done.
Yeah.
And then you mention abuse, like abuse is a practice. I mean, is this abuse because people feel empowered and so they would abuse anybody, Black, white, Hispanic, whatever? Or is this specific abuse against Black people?
Okay, you've asked so many questions in one breath. What I am saying is that in the Criminal Justice Academy, there are 770 hours training that you must go through. All of that training is based on technical stuff, physical, hands-on stuff, um, um, shooting, gun retention, law, all of that stuff. None of it is surrounded by sensitivity, diversity training, cultural training, none of that. And the only way you can get that changed is at the upper level from FDLE through an act of the legislature. And going into the police department, there's none either. For, training police officers are just like anyone else, like a doctor. We have a certificate. The police academy is only to get you certified. Your on-the-job training, this is where you're going to get all your knowledge. This is where you're going to build that psyche in that new officer's mind on how he should act. There's not that training in there that addresses diversity. And you would be surprised. You would think that people in this age and day, they would know the difference. They would know about Jewish culture. They would know about Black culture. They would know about certain things that are taboo to each culture or ethnicity or race, but people really don't know. Like I had someone tell me, now I cut my hair by choice, but I had some of my white colleagues are saying, a Black person's hair only grows 2 inches a year. And I was like, that certainly isn't true. You need this training. It is very relevant in what we do. And that's where I'm talking about the disconnect. When I talked about, you remember you had the Republican bill that the Democrats shot down. All of it has good points to it. Absolutely. You need to keep track of those rogue officers that commit crimes on their jobs, are fired and go to another organization and are hired. You need to ban chokeholds and all that type of thing. You need to address no-knock warrants that got the young lady Breonna Taylor killed because they were in the wrong house. There needs to be a database on use of force and all that type of thing. All of that has to come into play. We need that reform, and we need it real bad. And we need to figure out areas in which we can recruit people of color into law enforcement. What I know from a whole bunch of agencies, and of course I have colleagues all over the country that are police chiefs, you can get people of color in the door, but they never advance. And I think it starts from the top. You have, I could hardly get it. There's so many things in place with unions and all that type of thing that governs how we promote, how we recruit and all that type of thing. You can get them in the lower rungs, but you can't get them to advance up the ladder where their voice makes a decision and they have control of the department like I did. There's a few exceptional people, not exceptional, but outliers like myself who made it to the top, who started as an officer and all the way to the top. But that is very, very rare in the whole culture of law enforcement. So I want to shut up because I'm kind of getting off track here, but yeah.
Delsa, I agree with you. If you look at the ranks of the police departments, we have 4 Black police chiefs here in Palm Beach County. 4, all within the last 2 years, and all 4 of those men rose up through the ranks over many years. But I would guarantee you, as you go from chief all the way down to I don't know all the different captains and lieutenants and all that, there are very few minorities in between the top and the whole body. But it's the same way in corporate America. It's the same way in corporate America. There's only a handful of Black CEOs at corporate 500 corporations across this country, and you could probably count them on 2 hands. And if you look in the ranks in the C-suites across our corporations, they're very, very limited. And I'm talking over all these years of integration into major corporations, you have very, very few Black minorities in any type of leadership positions across this country. So it's systemic across the entire board, not only police departments, but in corporations alike.
Now, following on what Delsa said, I want to ask the following. If there were more Black police chiefs, there would be less cases like the case of George Floyd?
I wouldn't say that.
I think what he just articulated is that the Black chiefs do make the choices, but the officers, that's where you have them. It's not about the Black chief. It's about the chief way at the top, the Black chief, no one in between the Black chief and the officers that are on the street. If you don't know already, West Palm Beach is majority white by a long shot. So it's very rare that a person like me would be the chief of basically, when I started, an all-white police department. Out of like 300 officers at the time, we had like 28, 30 Black officers. So you have to, you gotta balance that some kind of way. And a lot of, for some reason, there's a stigma attached that people of color, especially young African-American people, they get their college degrees, they're saying the heck with police, we want to be in corporate America. We're not going to be out there doing this type of job. So it's hard to recruit those type of officers, and that's our biggest problem. But I'm not even saying that there, and then there's organizations all over the country that have a majority of Black police officers, and they still have problems. Let's take Riviera Beach, for example. Let's go down south to Miami-Dade. You know, we have a rainbow of people, mostly foreign, mostly Latina or Latino or Hispanic, whatever you choose it, and they still have problems too. So let's try to figure that one out. We got more. There's more. I believe, and I know that the minority on those big agencies like Miami-Dade Police Department, Broward, BSO, are probably more of a diverse culture than any place that I am aware of with Black Caribbean officers and everything else, and they still have a problem. Mm-hmm. So let's try and figure that one out.
Patrick, I mean, that's very interesting. And
that was a woman. She's a former police chief here.
Here, West Palm.
Stacy, you have to mute yourself.
Yeah, or you can mute her. So that is very interesting. I mean, and that will be my last question before we give it to the audiences.
I have a quick question, Luis, when you're done, before we move on.
Yeah, and my question to you, Patrick, is because you talk about disparities that go beyond the police department and beyond abuse and beyond that particular incident. So my question is, I have a, also just a question that has several parts. The first is, Patrick, are we a racist society, whether consciously or unconsciously, right? And we have theories today that say, well, every person that is not a person of color is somehow racist, whether he or she acknowledges it or not. That's the first question. The second is, can you identify certain progress in the treatment of minorities? I'm not talking only about the Black community, but Black community and minorities, right? You mentioned, for instance, the case of over-incarceration of minorities, right? That's one of the many issues you mentioned. And I know that there are people interested in Congress today to pass laws. I know one was passed in 2018, particularly to reduce, just to decriminalize certain acts that were criminalized under the 1993 law. Have we made any progress in all these areas where there is disparity, whether it is education, healthcare, income?
That's a huge question. Luis, because you said, I'm going to start off with the first one. Are we a racist society? I think no matter who you are and where you're from, you have some form of racism within your dialogue, within your thinking, within your culture. Be it a white person racist against black people, be it black people racist against other black people, be it white people racist against Jews. It doesn't make a difference. I think we all have some form of racism that we live with and that we ingest into our culture and society. I think that we have a long way to go to eradicate racism. I think that it's up to all of us to do that in the best way we can. And again, I still think that dialogue is the best way to do it. You said identify over incarceration of minorities. I think when you sentence minorities to small amounts of marijuana and things like this, I mean, I'm not a advocate of drug use, anything like that, but there's no need for you to have to do 5 years in jail for a small possession of marijuana, okay? The crime does not fit the punishment in so many instances when it comes to minorities. Minorities are so adversely affected because you may spend 3-4 months in jail because you can't meet the bond, or you don't have the right representation to move you along in the system. And minorities will always suffer from that with the laws that are in place right now. So I think the over incarceration is a tremendous issue right now, and that in our society today, in our system that we have in place today, if you can afford the best legal representation, your ability to move on beyond the crime that you may or may not be charged for goes a long way, okay? If you're poor and don't have, if you're in poverty and you're poor and you're arrested or whatever, you may suffer a much longer consequence for a much smaller criminal act than someone else who does much more different. So it's an imbalanced system right now, and I think the requisites for people according to your economic ability will determine your ability to go through the system at whatever pace that it will, and the consequences that may come from that.
Okay, Steve, you want to unmute the people and
I have a quick question myself. Just
there are other questions. I don't read anything on the chat. I assume.
Well, there is, but Luis, can you hear me?
So you read them because I cannot see them for some reason.
Can you hear me, Luis? Luis,
I
can
can
you hear
hear
me?
you well.
Okay, I have a quick question for Patrick. It's more of an applied question. I think a lot of what we're talking about, what you and Dr. Bush were speaking about, very important, but if I want to, I'd like to ask a question that brings it down to the ground level, an applied question. And what you do with the Urban League and the work I've done over the years working for some of the community organizations like Housing Partnership and Parent Child Center, Lord's Place, and so on and so forth. Do you see that that there could be real movement and change with public-private partnerships? Housing Partnership, for instance, partnered with the city of West Palm in building affordable housing, right? And they brought in a private company as well. And I see, so what I see, and just your comment on this, what I see is a real movement on the ground when the public sector, the nonprofit sector, and the for-profit sector get together and have a goal and do it one stone at a time.
Yeah, I see that happening. In my years at the Urban League, I have seen a big change. Stephen, the one thing that's moving on us right now is that what was affordable 10 years ago is right now almost out of range sometimes when you're talking about affordable housing here within the confines of the city of West Palm Beach maybe, or I would say within a reasonable driving distance within Palm Beach County. That is changing on us every day. But has been real movement in affordable housing here. I think we can do a whole lot better if the Sadowski funds would have been fully funded over the past years. We would have made a tremendous progress of affordable housing here in Palm Beach County. But that has just been wiped away. The millions of dollars that were supposed to be allocated for affordable housing, which could have really, I would say, would have been twofold of affordable housing here in Palm Beach County over the last 10 years if that would have been properly funded. I think the real true partnership with the public-private partnership with the municipalities, with organizations like myself and housing partnerships, those things will continue to grow and prosper here in Palm Beach County. And that is the one true flower that is still happening here in Palm Beach County.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I may not be taking these questions in order. I'll ask this, and then I see Brett's hand went up. We have a young person here by the name of Maya Fleischman, related to, I think, Luis's daughter, who's asking, can you talk about what police reforms, this is for Delsa, can you talk about what police reforms you would like to see happen? You mentioned that chokeholds are already banned, but that is how George Floyd was murdered. What kind of police reforms would you envision?
Okay, the police reforms that I envision, these are police reforms that must happen. Number one, you must hold officers accountable. There's been too many times where officers are, there's a due process for everybody. There's too many times where these people are not even charged until it comes to the public's attention. And then all of a sudden, like even with outside of George Floyd's death, the one prior to that, it wasn't police involved, but the man was killed by a group of people. And we know about that, stalked and killed. And then prosecutors and district attorneys don't even file the case until it becomes a public matter. We must change our training. This is about training, and it is not all about training. It's about putting in that sensitivity training that I talked about. Don't just focus on how well the officer can shoot. Do more things as it relates to hiring, the psychological examinations, weeding those bad people out, dealing with the no-knock warrants that can get an innocent person killed because the officer knocks on the wrong door, having a database of bad officers that go from one department to another, using those tools that have been around for a long time, mandating that these happen in every department, not just some, of what we call an early warning system. When an officer gets so many complaints about him, we track all of that. And that's what I did when I was a police chief. We tracked that. When we saw that an officer was involved in more unnecessary uses of force than he should be, then we deal with that officer. We either put him on probation or retrain, move him around, or get rid of him from the organization. But a lot of things you cannot train for. And that's like what you saw. You said, oh, we teach, we should train officers not to put their foot on somebody's neck. Well, that would be an analogy to a metaphor for we shouldn't train someone to poke somebody's eyes out. There's certain things you can't, what happened there was insane, and in a lot of cases. You can't train people not to be racist. You can't train people not to be totally insane and abusive where you would sit there and kill somebody. It's just like I said, how can you train someone to do that, to not do the things that happen in the Floyd case. You can't. It's not about, we give officers the utmost training in a lot of things, but what's lacking is the cultural diversity and the sensitivity training. And what is missing that has reverted, that worked in Congress approved this, and in the community policing concept, that is what's missing. All the good things are going away. The good things like community policing, when you put one officer in one district, he rides that district every day. He knows everybody in that community. And when something goes awry, he doesn't react like you see these people just officers moving around. He doesn't know these people. Check this out on YouTube. There's a video with a little black girl. She's driving a little play car, and the police pulls her over, and she hops out of the car and starts running. Okay, this officer that filmed the video with her, he's a community police officer. He knows everybody in that community. They thought it was funny. When I first saw it, I didn't quite think it was funny, but I was like, it is funny because they know him so well that they trust him to do a video, a parody like that. So we need to get all those concepts back. We need the community policing, we need the sensitivity training. We need all of that stuff to come back in. But you can never train someone not to be a racist and not to be a fool and just to kill somebody. You can't train your way out of that.
Thank you for that in-depth response, Dr. Bush. Brett, you had your hand up and it's not up now. Do you still have a question?
Oh, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Delsa and Patrick, for your remarks and for also bringing the conversation to be a little bit bigger than just law enforcement and to talk about affordable housing and unemployment as factors that are related to this. My question for Delsa was, you mentioned that in the beginning of your remarks, you're not in favor of the slogan defund the police. You are in favor of reform the police. And something that kind of seems to be a repeating theme in all this is that I think anyone would agree that the phrasing defund, or even worse, abolish the police, really, it doesn't really go over too well, especially when once it's explained, what they're talking about is possibly reallocating some funding, not eliminating the police, simply making changes, basically doing reform, which is what you said you would be in favor of. Mm-hmm. So in the sense of reform, do you think there are areas where other services other than law enforcement can play a role? And as a result, there may be some, not necessarily defunding, but reallocation of resources outside of law enforcement. Do you think that's a possibility?
Oh, absolutely. I am so glad you brought that up. I am so glad. I really am. Because let me tell you, police work, I'm serious, 99% of the time, I won't say 99%, but at least 70% of the time, police officers are expected to be the social workers. We are the last resort for everything. When everything goes awry, everyone call police. We have to be the social workers. We have to be the mentors. We do so much out of the realm of arresting people that you wouldn't even believe. I mean, a lot of families call us like at their last resort. I can't do anything with my incorrigible child. Can you please come and help us? We sit there for hours trying to deal with, even though my child has run away, even though running away is not against the law, we go and find the child, bring the child back home, try to find social resources to put people in. We do a whole lot of things. If you're not familiar with the Baker Act, that's an involuntary commitment that only a few people can do. We do so many of those. We do Myers or Marshman Act now. When people are just drunk and falling, we pick them up, get them resources. We work with victim services for homicide victims and rape victims. we do so much that's social service, and Lord, police need more funding for that. They need to recognize this. But instead of providing more funding, everything is going backwards. We had like our police athletic league where we dealt with little kids. I ran a daycare as a police chief right there at 7th Street in Tamron.
Yes, you did.
Because
Yes, you did.
and I'm like, yeah, please yeah, help us
Yes.
with that, because that's what we do. Instead of what you see in the media so much of the bad officer, dealing with Franklin and you and your housing initiative, I applaud you for that. He came into the community and tried to provide low income housing. We even built at Henrietta.
Yeah, we did. We
Oh
did.
my God. And yeah, we try to do like so much, and he did so much. And I mean, I'm so glad you brought that question up.
But Delsa, I just want to add to that, because look, policing, law enforcement is the hardest job in this country to do. Okay, there's no other job that will take you from A to Z in 20 minutes that you can ever imagine. But I would like to answer that question. When we talk about police reform, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not an advocate of defunding police. I'm an advocate of police reform. But I think in part of that reform, we need to allocate dollars for mental health, because so much of what Chief Bush just described, they are everything to everybody. And you couldn't imagine all the different things. When she said she was a daycare, yes, she was. She was a daycare. She was a senior. She was a senior care citizen. She was everything. So we have put so much on our law enforcement to do in today's society that is overwhelming. And the split-second decisions that have to be made right now in this industry and in this time of cameras and everybody seeing everything, now we see what some of the bad issues are. But at the same time, we have to be able to support our law enforcement with the right tools and maybe bringing people that will address the mental health issues that are happening so much in our communities today.
Okay, thank you both. I have a question from Linda Geller-Schwartz. Linda writes, could Delsa Bush and Patrick Franklin each indicate which policy change they think would make the biggest difference in addressing the systemic discrimination in the society? There's a broad question for you.
Yeah, I don't think that there's one policy. I think when you start looking at all the different areas of criminal justice reform, health reform, education reform, police reform, when you start looking at all these things, I think the change has to come in little snippets from each one, because each one adversely affects the other. It's almost like a gear, because as you change one, you need to change the other to coincide with the changes that you're making. We've talked about some of the things that need to change in criminal justice, just the petty laws and the imprisonment times that are not only demanded of the crime now, it has to be readjusted. Health reform, we have so many different issues with healthcare in this country. I know a lot of people may be against the Obamacare, but for so many people, that's all they have. That's all they have. And in this time of COVID, we're seeing the disparities even heighten to a new level right now. So when you look at criminal justice, health reform, education reform, police reform, and I'm quite sure there's another half dozen more to go along with that, I think you take a little bit off each one of them, and they all go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And since she made this more or less a global question about what we can do about racism, like nationally and globally, I think everybody better really open their eyes and realize that this is a browning of not just America, but all over the world. I am a person, believe it or not, I have a whole lot of ancestry in myself. Asian, Black, white, a whole bunch. And we just did understand. And I have three brothers that are all married to women of different races, even one that is married to one of Jewish descent. And I have nieces and nephews coming from both a Jewish side and a black side. Imagine that, and imagine the interesting wedding that we went to. we're a Browning of the world. We are not. Everybody has something in you, and I dare you to go ahead and do your DNA and find out really what your ethnicity is and your race is. And there's no turning back. There's not gonna be black versus white anymore. That
Right.
is over with. It's over with. Petra, I can look at you. I can look at all of us. Got something. You got French somewhere in you, but
Oh,
we have to understand that, and we have to stop judging people on the way that they look. It's just and what in my mind that keeps black people at the lower rung is that's just that, because we're black, we're salient, we stick out, our skin is mostly darker than some people. But if you go in other countries, in India, you're going to see some people that's much darker than people in sub-Saharan Africa. So stop going by people's skin
right.
color, go by their brains and their soul and the content of their. Go back to the old Martin Luther King stuff. That's the only way that's gonna stop it. Stop judging people on the way that they look. And that is my opinion. And we are gonna stay disenfranchised. If you walk, you can't in most ethnicities and races, you probably can't tell who is what, but you can definitely tell a black person from a black person, unless they're something. So let's get over that. Let's do the things that Patrick talked about. Let the legislation begin. Let us get a leader in these United States of America that has everybody's interest in their minds. And I'm not trying to go into politics, but what's happening now is dead wrong, and everybody knows that. And we were talking about left wings and liberals. You're a nonpartisan group of people. I'm nonpartisan myself. I can go either way. I can go. I have been able. We've been able to live the fortunate life of those quote, middle class blacks or African Americans. I drive the fanciest of cars, live in a big house, all that kind of stuff. The world owes me nothing. But then there are people that are much below me that worry about what they're going to eat for the day. And I try to, I try and spread my wealth, but let's just stop judging people based on how they look, how they talk. Everyone goes, I have a heavy voice. And when I was a kid, they were like, oh, she has a disability because her voice is so heavy and she talks so slow. Well, guess what? My IQ is higher than just like a whole bunch of other people. So don't judge people on how they look, how they act, or whatever. Let's, move forward with this. It's just hard.
Yeah. Delsa, one thing I like to add to that, because right now, a lot of our young Black Americans right now, they really feel in their heart that it's a crime to be Black in America right now. Okay? They feel as if they're already judged as a criminal because of the color of their skin in America. And we as the older generation are going to have to really, work with them and understand that we understand and how can we help them, because our young people are our destiny, and that's our future. And I applaud the number of young people, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, that are protesting peacefully right now across this country and across this world right now, saying that enough is enough. And they understand the issues that they have seen that their friends go through. And they said, no, that's not right. And I think we all need to take a very long look at and not only applaud, but to help them understand, so we can understand more that we can do better as a society. We can do better.
Patrick and Dr. Bush, thank you very much.
If
I
there
have
are
to,
people who raise their hands
oh, let's see.
via the camera and not through by, you know, I see Mitchell Tal, I think, raise his hand. I don't know.
Oh,
whether,
okay, I don't see it here on the,
camera.
let's see, so you're looking at, okay, so I see hands up. So how about Bob Kaplan? You have a question? I can't, you have to unmute you. So you have to unmute your. All right, so let's see if I can.
Okay, I think I
Okay.
did it. I
Okay,
think I did
There
it.
you
I
go.
want to thank Delsa and Patrick very much. I'm Bob Kaplan. I'm here through Louis Fleischman, God bless him. And I want to say, when we go back in our history, okay, when we go back in our history, no one has been downplayed more than the Black people in America for a long, long time. But if you're Jewish, you might say my entire grandparents' family was wiped out in East Europe, okay, by the Nazis. And for 3,000 years, we were persecuted, the Jewish people. So we both have heartaches in our side. My point is that you raise a lot of issues. And what comes to mind is a conversation I had with a Black friend of mine who I went to a temple with this summer. And he's 39, I'm 80 years old. And he said, Bob, no, this is the first time I've ever been in the temple. So all of a sudden I'm racking my brain and I'm saying, you know something, a lot of these issues that you bring up, it would be nice if we invite people of different colors and creeds into our temples, our shuls, and you invite them into your churches, and we have small dialogue meetings so we can discuss these issues and maybe bring it up further to the people above us. It's just one of my thoughts.
I think that's amazing. I really, I'm sorry. I think that's amazing. I lived out at Boynton Jog Road and Boynton Beach Boulevard in a development there, and there's a Jewish temple right down the street. And my best friends, Chet and Sue Hartogzen, always invited me to Jewish temple. And I went, and it was eye-opening for me, dealing with the rabbis and all that type of thing. And they cook it. And they told me they were going to cook me some Jewish soul food. So it was the unleavened bread and crackers with the kosher broth on it. Was the best thing I've ever eaten in my life. So,
Delsa,
you're on it. You're on it.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah,
how to do that?
Yeah, Delsa, what bothers me is the American Jewish Committee about 4 years ago on it. I was a member of the Black Jewish Economic Roundtable in Boston, and they honored both of us, and we were lucky enough to have Alan Dershowitz come in as a keynote speaker. My thought is that if somehow, I mean, people try to divide our people. They shouldn't try to divide us because we're two minority groups, okay? And we could become so strong together, okay? But we have, my concern right now is Black Lives Matter always mattered to me, okay? Black Lives Matter. But the organization, from what I'm seeing and from what I'm reading, okay, is becoming very anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, Antifa-like, and those are things we can discuss in meetings, in shuls or in churches, and get together like that to see if we're on the same page. Because we have to stick together, really.
Yeah.
We need each other. We shouldn't let other people divide us.
Man,
That's what I'm bringing up. I don't know what your thoughts are on the same.
No, I agree. I agree. Frankly, I really agree.
I agree with you also, Bob, because you know the most segregated place in America is Sunday mornings in church. Okay,
Really?
that's the most segregated place. I mean, if you go to any church, is whites go to their church, blacks go to their church, and then we all separate. And I think that's a great idea if we would come together more in the places that we all worship and gather in, and share ideas. So I agree with you.
Okay, well, thank you. I see there are a couple more hands up. So did Elizabeth, you had your hand up earlier? Did you want to say something? No. Okay, so the last one, we'll close out with Michael, and then I'll give my closing comments. Michael Landau, if you want, your hand is up. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to thank our guests for our esteemed guests for coming and speaking their minds and basically telling us what's going on from their perspective, what's going on in their communities. I have a lot of things to say, but at this point, I really don't want to because I don't want to go off on a whole nother tangent. But again, I wanted to thank everybody for coming, and particularly our guests. And thank you, Steve, for hosting.
Thank you.
You got he has to say a couple things. Go on ahead. Don't worry, we have tough skin.
Well, yeah,
You must know Michael then, so there he goes. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Michael.
let him bring it on.
okay.
We got you.
Delsa, I got
Boil it down to a quick question. How's that?
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, I'm not bigoted, not a racist or anything. Matter of fact, I go back to 1964 with the Philadelphia Phillies when they broke our hearts, and I didn't know any of those players were either black or Hispanic or white. They were all baseball players to me, and that's kind of the way I feel. We're all human beings, and we're all on this same planet. Okay. However, I can tell you one thing that I've noticed in my 66 years of being on Earth is that the communities of the Poles, the Italians, the Jews, and particularly the Asian community have very strong family ties, and they're because of that they have the culture is very heavily family, and they have not only is it family, but that that goes beyond into education. I know when I was going to when I wanted to cut school and I did so, my parents really got annoyed at me, and that's the other thing. My parents were not divorced, or even in a divorced family, there's love and so on and so forth. My concern is that in the Black community, what I see is that you have so many unmarried and non-committal relationships, and you have a lot of the men going out and siring for 4 or 5 women with children, and that's just not right, and that creates a lot of the problem. So my question to you guys is, what can you do to change that mindset in the communities?
Okay, can you?
All right, Delsa, you go first. I'll close it.
Yeah. You know what? I tell you, I really do respect your opinion because I feel the same too on a lot of issues. I feel the same too, coming from a family, and believe it or not, I had a brother that had 9 children by 7 different women, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't convince him that he was not doing what the Bible told him to do, to multiply his seed. A lot of that, what you see in a small, what you think you see it's not truly wholly in the Black population. A lot of Black men and women believe the same way that you do. You sire a horse, you conceive a child.
I'm sorry, you are correct.
Okay, so get that right. So in any event, what you must realize too is that young African men, we're not, if you've been disenfranchised for so long because of the color of your skin, totally alone, you can't find a job, you are disenfranchised because you get one minor violation in your record and you can never find a job. Are you going to starve to death, or are you going to get out on the street and sell drugs to feed yourself and feed your family? And what's different about those young black men or black women that are fathering children out of marriage or illegitimate kids, however you want to call, what's so different about them than all the people in Hollywood? Like, let's say Angelina Jolie, that had about how many kids out of it. Was she married? She may have the means to support them, but you're talking two different things. You're talking about what's morally right and what's financially right. Every Hollywood star I know have a child. You don't even know the name of the father or anything like that. But
I agree.
yeah, so don't judge, but that is the problem. And because you put welfare hardly exists anymore. There used to be a time where people were having kids because the more kids they had, the more welfare they get. But that stuff doesn't happen anymore. You don't get food stamps anymore. You may get a stimulus check for them or something like that, but don't think that happens, because I was born in Mississippi. And I think they just decided that they weren't gonna fly the Confederate flag, last week? I went to visit this little town that I was supposedly born in when I was there, because it was on my birth certificate. And when I saw the Confederate flag flying, and I went into the quote welcome center, and they like spit tobacco near my feet and basically told us we weren't welcome 2 years ago, I hauled buggity and left. But even Mississippi is like stuck in the time zone. But even in Mississippi, people are starting to move. They're starting to progress. So don't group everybody together. But to make a long story short, my parents was from there. They were married. They had 7 kids. They only had a 3rd grade education. And look at me, from my parents with a 3rd grade education to a PhD. Trust you me, there's a lot of moral in the black community. Just go to a black Sunday service like Patrick is going to tell you in a minute. We're not all like that.
No,
Patrick, bring us home.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Delsa, thank you. I'm going to lead off with one thing. Michael, both sets of my grandparents are married almost 70 years, both sets. On my mother's side, my father's side. My parents have been married for 62 years. My in-laws have been married for 61 years. I've been married for 32 years. All 3 of my brothers have been married for almost 25 plus years. Don't stereotype and paint the brush of every black family that's led by a single parent mother. Yes, that is the case in a lot of our low income areas. 80% of the people I see are low income, single parent mother led families. And if it wasn't for the single parent mother, God help where the black generations would be. And you got to go back. I'm reading Frederick Douglass's book right now, the book about Frederick Douglass, and I encourage each of you to read it. And it's stunning right now to read that book and listen to and understand what happened 120 years ago and what we're going through right now. That wasn't a long time ago, 120 years ago. My grandmother was born in 1906. She lived for 101 years here. And Frederick Douglass died in 1895. And when I look at how young that time span is and what we've gone through, we've lost 2 generations of young black men in the criminal justice system. 2 generations right now. We're working on our 2nd generation of lost Black men that are incarcerated at 18, 19, 20 for most of it non-violent crimes that have mandatory sentences attached to that. And like Chief Bush says, once you come out,
The 1990s, since the crime law passed, that's what you're talking about when you talk about the 2 generations?
yes, we've lost 2 generations of young men.
Since the 1990s, okay.
Since the 1980s. You go back to the 80s and the late 70s to the 80s. And when you start looking at men that are locked up, oppressed, when they come out, they have no rights. They have no ability to get a job. They have no skills. They have no education. And that system keeps grinding them down in a spiral constantly. They're not going anywhere. That's what we face with right now. And when you talk about generation after generation, this is happening. We have to really look at why it's happening, why it's systemic, why we have the issues that we have right now. And look, I agree that there's no need to have multiple children if you're a single parent. But we see this across not only Black but white. There are 3 times more single parent white mothers with children than there are Black. 3 times, or maybe even higher. So let's not stereotype that, because there is a long history of strong Black families in this country. And there will continue to be long history of strong Black families, because right now we're working on our youth that are understanding that education is the key to get out of poverty. And that our young people that are coming through the ranks right now, they understand, they're trying to understand their place in society. And what we need to do as some of the elders in the room is to help them get there. Help them understand that they need to move on beyond that, but we also need to help the people that are ingrained in the system, deeply ingrained in the system. I just saw a news report on CNN right before this show, before this program came on tonight, that a single Black mother was talking about her mother was on welfare, and then her mother was on welfare. And I go like, the whole story was what she did to break that poverty cycle. That's what we have to get to. How do we break that cycle? And this is about helping people, educate them, provide a better education system, provide better health care, provide better jobs that they can come out and break the system. And going back to the criminal justice, again, we can't lock up 80% of our young Black men and expect them to survive in this society. It just doesn't equate. You can't tell someone, okay, I'm gonna lock you up for 3 years for a misdemeanor, for a felony misdemeanor crime, simple possession, but when you come out, you won't be able to get a job. You have to check the box. And the majority of the people that are provide that job for you, they don't want you in their workplace. And no matter how much you said, that was me when I was 18, I'm 27, I understand my path now. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Our society keeps you down, it keeps you oppressed, keeps you right there. And until we change those laws, look, we passed a constitutional amendment in the state of Florida 2 years ago, passed it, majority. And we've yet to implement it to give you back your rights after you have served your time. We've yet to implement the law that was passed 2 years ago. Because those in power want to keep that power. They don't want to bring 1,400 Black men back on the roll, or majority Black men back on the rolls as potential Democrats to vote. They don't want that. That's going to tip the scales of balance. So we have to constantly look at what the laws are. The laws will keep people oppressed.
Okay.
Okay, Frank, Patrick, thank you and Dr. Bush, thank you for those closing comments. I have to tell you,
One thing before we close, I wanted to say
Yes.
that Patrick, here we have in the audience, we have Linda Geller Schwartz. She's a member of our Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research. And she was really a leader in the state of Florida in trying to pass that law, that referendum that basically enabled ex-convicts to vote. And I know that she's very busy trying just to work now to undo what the state is trying to do. Linda, I think she left, right?
no, she's here. She posted a question I asked earlier.
Yeah, I know,
Linda-
but I don't
Lin-
know if she's still
I'm
here.
here.
Linda,
Yeah.
oh, here she is. Linda actually worked very hard to try to pass the law.
I was just one of many, many people who has put some effort through the League of Women
No,
Voters.
but you took a leadership role, Linda. Yeah.
And Linda has made a huge difference in Palm Beach County in many different communities. So she's truly it's been an honor to know her and work with her over the years.
Thank you. But my concern right now is that the law is stuck in the courts, and the 11th Circuit is not really moving on it, and it's by the time they get to it, I don't know what's going to happen for this election. So it really is what Patrick Franklin said, really tragic that after 65% of the people voted for this amendment, we just can't get it in place.
Right. Look, I saw Delsa had her hand like she wanted to say something. Did you want to say something about?
No, I was just
Okay.
trying to give it a high five. Thank you.
Okay. So, Luis, unless you have something to say.
No, I
have
want to
my
thank
closing.
the speakers. I think they were terrific, and I
Well,
want to thank the audience for this wonderful discussion. We had a parallel discussion in the chat that took me a while to.
Right. Right. So,
But I'm glad that all this actually. I'm
right.
glad
And we're going to. This will be.
notice.
Sorry, Luis.
Terrific
This
job.
will be posted. This video will be posted, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the chat will be posted as well. So you can get some interesting ideas of the parallel comments going on. And Luis, I don't mean to embarrass people, but Luis has to be proud of his daughter. She handled herself beautifully on this on the parallel chat. So I wanted to. This turned out to be, frankly, we've done a number of these, and this is right at the top. This was really fantastic. And so I'd like to thank Dr. Bush and Mr. Franklin for your comments and really for your incredible work over the many years in Palm Beach County. And I want to thank everyone who attended this evening. Certainly without your presence and participation, our center wouldn't be here. Having said that, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. Please visit our website at palmbeachdemocracy.org. And of course, click on the donation button. Your tax-deductible donation will allow us to build an even stronger presence in Florida, the US, and throughout the world. And we take no salaries. Everything goes into the organization. Last, but certainly not least, today is Luis's wife's birthday. So the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research wishes Laura Fleischman a very happy and healthy birthday. And with that, I once again thank you all for attending, and good night.
Thank you. And
Good
don't
night.
forget,
Thank you.
Wednesday, July 15th, we have a discussion with Mrs. Gibson, Rosemarie Gibson, that she will talk about our dependency on China's medical products. That is a program that was made possible thanks to Nancy Menges, who is in the audience tonight. Looking forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
And can you guys please keep us posted on a little bit of your feedback after you air this? And
Absolutely.
And secondly, thank you. Please do not hinder anyone's opinion or their comment. It is what it is, and this is what makes us so great, because each of us have our own opinion, regardless of how extreme it is, As long as you don't take any action on any extremism that's gonna affect anyone, then we're just fine. So thank you guys for the forum.
Take it, very wise words. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody. And thank you so much. And thank
Good
you,
night.
Luis, of course. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.